Hi, I'm Anna from Geeks Are Wired podcast, and I'm here with Lisle Wilkerson. And
hi, Anna.
Hi. How are you today?
I'm wonderful.
Thank you for asking. How was everything coming in here to Pocatello?
It was good. It was an early flight, but I flew in from LA, so LA is a crazy airport, so I usually try to get a very early flight. So I'm used to that part. But no, it was smooth sailing, no problems at all, getting in and getting checked into the hotel and then coming here. Yes, so far so good.
That's great. How was the opening last night as far as all the guests meet and greet? Did you enjoy that?
I did. Some of the people that were here I've met before. A few of them are good friends of mine, so that was really nice to be able to see them and just kind of, get caught up in their lives and hear how they're doing. And then also it was a lot of fun to meet new guests as well. That's one of my favorite things about coming to these conventions and events is being able to meet other people who are in the industry, because for me, I was in Japan for a very long time, and that's how I got most of my work done, in Japan. So it's really cool to be able to meet other people here in the U.S. who do the same kind of thing as me or different.
So what I've read about you, you actually were born in Japan, is that right?
I grew up in Japan.
So
I moved there when I was 5. My dad was a linguistics professor in Japan. I grew up, I first lived in Tokyo, which is the northern part of Japan. It's where the earthquake and tsunami was in 2011. But I lived there for 3 years, and then after that I was in Tokyo for pretty much the rest of my life until I moved to the States in 2008.
Oh, so you've been in the States for about 10 years after
this is
that
my 10th year. Yeah.
That's a long time.
It is a long time.
To be overseas. So what's different with the culture and everything that you've actually noticed with
Japan? My gosh. Everything. It's a very interesting experience for me because obviously I don't look Japanese, right? So when I first moved here, I would find myself in these very awkward situations where I'm reacting to a certain situation the only way I know of, and everyone else is looking at me like, what's wrong with you? Were you just born yesterday? It's like a Rip Van Winkle kind of experience because I was reacting to something the way a Japanese person would react, but because obviously I don't look Japanese, I don't really look foreign, and then a lot of people tell me I have this American California girl kind of accent, so they expect me to know about the culture here, and I don't, and so I was constantly I call them my zone, getting into the zone. I'm like, oh, here we go again. I have no idea what's happening. But little things, even like my first time I ever went to Starbucks in the States.
What kind of experience was that for you?
So when I moved to Japan, or when I moved to the U.S. in 2008, I literally had not even been to visit for probably 15 years. Obviously, the U.S. had changed a lot since then. And so I thought, okay, I need to find a safe place that I feel at least a little bit familiar with here in America. That's going to be my first U.S. experience. And so I thought Starbucks. We have tons of Starbucks in Japan. They're all over, right? And so I went to the Starbucks, and I brought out my change purse, and the woman was like, oh, that'll be $4.33, whatever the cost of the drink was. And I'm bringing out these pennies and dimes and everything, to give her the exact change. And she just kind of went, oh my gosh, I can't even be bothered with this, right? And then the person behind me was also so frustrated, right? They're like, and they made it very, it was very obvious that they were not you know. And I'm thinking to myself, what did I do? I'm just giving exact change. I'm doing her job for her, is what I'm thinking, right? And in Japan, if you give the exact amount, they will actually thank you. In most restaurants, a lot of times, especially in like a Starbucks kind of place or like a restaurant, they'll say, ちょうどです。ありがとうございました, you know, kind of thing, like their little singy-songy kind of voice, you know, and they're like, thank you for the exact change, you know, kind of thing. So I had no idea what I had just screwed up so royally, you know, and so I went over to the side, and I'm sitting there watching the next guy who had gotten so frustrated with me, and he pulled out a credit card, right? And I just remember thinking, oh, you can use a credit card in Starbucks, you know, because in Japan is still very much of a cash society, and so a lot of places you cannot use credit cards. They don't have a debit card system, and so I just remember, you know, and Starbucks is one of those places where you can't use a credit card. It's changed now, but 10 years ago you couldn't use a credit card unless it was a huge order, so like an office order or something like that. And so I just thought, oh, this is the land of the free. You know, I was just, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah. So it started from there, and it was just all these crazy experiences where I'm like, what? Why did people just get mad at me? What did I just do?
It's a completely different culture between the Japanese culture,
very different culture
and the American culture.
Yes.
I've been to Japan once. For a week for my honeymoon. It was back in 2012.
Nice.
And so I noticed that there are quite a bit of differences as far as being here and being there. And they're a lot more polite. And there was one time that I actually had gone to a McDonald's, and I know all the foods and everything are definitely different and everything there. But what I did notice that was really different about the culture is that students or whoever would go and just kind of go there and relax, go there and study, that they could leave their laptop, they could leave their backpack, they could leave their purse, and they're not worried at all as far as like other people disturbing that.
Yeah. I mean, you do have to be a little bit careful, I think, depending on the area, but yeah, in general, when I have Japanese friends or clients who are coming over, I do tell them you need to be very careful. You can't just leave your pocketbook everywhere. That just doesn't work, and it works in Japan a lot of times. Another thing that, you know, speaking of the McDonald's, you know, and this is one thing that kind of drives tourists or people who live there crazy a lot of times, is that there are no substitutions. I don't know if you dealt with that when you were there, but if you go to McDonald's and you ask for no pickles, they will say, like, you know, basically, I can't do that, right? And you're like, yeah, you can. You just take the pickles out. It's not that big of a deal, but they just can't. The way the culture is, it's just structurally like that, where it's a hierarchy, and the person who is taking your order can't make those decisions to switch up your order in any way, change it, whatever. Like, they don't. Restaurants everywhere, like they just can't do it, you know. And so because I do a lot of interpreting for clients as well, and many times in Japan I had to explain.
How does that work, or how does someone actually become an interpreter?
It's a work in progress even now. I got a little bit thrown into it because I was in radio for so long, so I was always doing interviews for various people. They would come on my radio show, and I would interview them in English, and then I would have to flip it into Japanese right away. And so that was a natural progression for me to get into interpreting work. Since moving to the States, I've done a lot of interpreting. And I actually really enjoy doing it as well, because I think one of the things is, especially if it was someone in my position, I know the culture so well, and so it's not just about the language, right? A lot of times there's so much more going on, like culturally and everything, and so I'm able to really kind of assist with that and give my client, whether it's a Japanese or American or
That's really cool because you actually know where they're coming from.
Yes.
And exactly like what their understanding is as far as like the cultural differances between. So like beyond that, like as far as kind of bringing you back here, but could you tell our guests, like our listeners here on Geeks Are Wired, what type of work that you've done as far as on video games, on anime, on some of those other things?
Yes. I do a lot of fighting games, so games like Tekken, Nina Williams, Christy Monteiro. Like I have a lot of fighting girls, as I like to call them. Virtua Fighter, Sarah Bryant. Also Crazy Taxi. I did so many of the voices for that. Like I've been doing it since the early 90s, so I've been doing it for a really long time. And unfortunately, there's tons out there that I don't even know the name of the game, and and I'm not, it's just back then that's how it was, right? So
yes. What other voice actors have you actually kind of worked with that you felt has been an impact in your life?
I think actually, I don't know if I would say that I've been impacted by any voice actors. I will say, though, that for me, so I'm very music driven. So the whole way I got into video game voice acting is because I was in radio. And radio was a huge impact on me. So I grew up listening to like veterans such as Wolfman Jack and Charlie Tuna and some of these. Casey Kasem I listened to religiously. I was always taping his countdown show that he had, and also I was in Japan where we didn't get that much in the way of content, both on radio or on TV. But for me, that was, I think, very, very impactful, I would say. So it wouldn't be voice actors. I think it would be some of the classic DJs that I grew up with that just really helped to form my love for music. And when I had the opportunity to get into radio, I was like, yes.
So how did you actually start the radio?
So there was a radio station that was opening up in Japan. It was the first radio station that was going to be this big international station. They were looking for bilingual, bicultural people to have both on staff and also as DJs. And I was very lucky in that I got to meet with the guy who started the radio station. And at that time, they were looking for someone to help coordinate a live radio segment, which was on every morning at 7:45 a.m. for the Morning Man, Monday through Friday. His name was John Kabira. He continues to be on radio and continues to be one of my dearest friends. He's like a big brother to me. But so I started off coordinating that segment. So we did things like call up the first ever Russian McDonald's. We would call the manager and talk to him about, so what are you expecting? Now remember, this was way back when like email and everything was not really a thing. So it was all very, old school. It was like faxes and phone calls. And
so around what year was that? Or like what?
88, 89.
88, 89?
Yes.
Oh, that's a really long time.
It is a really long time ago. Let's not do the math now. Just kidding. Yes, it was a long time ago. So, but working with him and being in the studio because I had to go in the studio like 3 or 4 times a week to make sure that the segment that I coordinated went well. And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't, But watching him on the radio show, I thought, I love music and I would love to do something like that. So I started doing on my own. There was like a little radio station in an area called Harajuku, and I went there and I started honing my chops there. And
were you on Harajuku Street?
Or it was near Harajuku Street. Yes. Yeah.
Do you enjoy the culture around Harajuku?
I grew up there. So that area, I grew
Okay.
up in that area. Yeah. I love Harajuku. Harajuku, Montesando, Shibuya, like those are areas that I've spent a lot of time. Yeah, I love it. And maybe one of the reasons I love it so much is because of the youth culture. Like there's so much going on, so it's just like if you're not if you're feeling tired or you're not feeling well, it's not the time to go to Harajuku Shibuya because it's just sensory overload, or it can be. So it can be very, very kind of taxing and exhausting. But I grew up in that area, so I absolutely love that area. Yeah.
That's really cool. So, what other things did you experience as you were growing up there in Japan, like that our listeners might be interested in hearing?
Let me see. I think that I don't know. One of the things I would probably say, growing up, this would be maybe more like when I started working in Japan, is I had to really have a lot of tolerance in some ways, patience, and then also not to take myself too seriously, because there's constantly things happening and you're always the gaijin. I was always, no matter how good my Japanese was, I was always the foreigner, and a lot of people when they go over there as an adult, they get really frustrated with it because people are staring at them all the time. There's just all that, but for me, it's like, well, yeah, there's that, but then there's also a lot of the really wonderful aspects of the Japanese culture. You're never going to have the utopian culture or country. So, I think that it was really good for me because it gave me the opportunity to, one, mesh two cultures together and kind of create my own culture. But then also it did give me a sense of not tolerance as in trying to always understand the other side. There's certain cultures, say Indian culture. Why do they do that? There's a lot of times there's a reasoning behind it, whereas we don't understand because we come maybe from a different point of view.
Right.
But so I think that that's probably one of the things that I really treasure the most, maybe.
That's really cool. What I found interesting about Japan, though, is that they actually had temples all over the place, even scattered inside the city.
Yes. And I think that they do that, like in Meiji, you're probably thinking about Meiji Shrine, Meiji Jingu. One of the reasons they do that is because the city of Tokyo is just constant it's in your face. It's like I said, sensory overload. The Japanese culture, Japanese corporate culture is very much about having to keep things in. Like it's always gaman, what they call in Japanese, which is, hold it in. It's all for the greater good. It's all for the greater good of Japan. It's never about the individual, right? And I think that can really get tiring and frustrating for an everyday Japanese. And so they have these temples that you can go and you can kind of just recenter, like during your lunch break or, stuff like that. And so one of the things that I will always tell people, because I actually have a panel that I do called Destination Tokyo, where I talk about some great places to go and things to do, and I try to keep it really updated, current information. But one of the things I tell people is if you're not afraid, like if you won't have a panic attack if you get lost, then sometimes I recommend getting lost because it's where you can find these really cute little temples or shrines.
I really did get lost, and I needed help from a couple people, and it was getting dark.
You, right?
They were super helpful.
Yeah, exactly.
And they were so nice, and my husband and I, we were like, where do we go?
Yeah.
We can't get out. So, yeah, everybody is super nice there. And I enjoy that. So, as far as your work, did that bring you here back to the U.S. in 2008, or what actually brought you back here?
No, I was kind of at a point in my life where I just thought that I've been doing radio for a really long time, and to this day, radio is my first love. I love radio, but the current style and model of radio, traditional model, was definitely not going to be around for much longer, you know. iTunes, you know, just the way people approach music is very different than it was 10 years ago, 15 years ago. So I decided that I didn't really want to be in that world anymore. And I also thought, you know, I've never lived in the States really, so I'd like to kind of live here, and I'm okay with starting all over again, you know, but I was at this age where I felt like I could do it and still make it work, you know. I thought if I get any older, it'll be a lot harder for me. So, yeah, so I decided to just start all over. Yeah.
So as far as when you came back to the U.S., like what have you done since then over the last decade?
I've done a lot. So I've done a lot of interpreting, which has really led me onto some wonderful things. Through my work here, like I worked with Keanu Reeves. He had a film, it was his directorial debut called Man of Tai Chi. And I did the set interpreting for that. He's working, or for that film, he worked with a very famous Japanese art director, Yohei Taneda. And so I was on set interpreting for him the whole time. Just last week, I was over at SpaceX, interpreting for Elon Musk and his team. They just had an announcement about the first private citizen that's going to be going around the moon. I was there interpreting for that, for both those teams.
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, like, and this is the thing, like what I really love about interpreting work is I love people and I love different industries and learning about people's stories. And being an interpreter, you're able to kind of be a part of that, you know, and to kind of help facilitate, you know, like the different relationships between people. So I've done stuff like that. I also continue to do some of the voice acting for video games. So like the Street Fighter Cross Tekken, I did that over here. I also did the voice for Ultraman Mom for quite a few like live action films. Recently I did one, it's a short film called Team T-Nets. And it's currently going around the award or the film festival circuit, and so yeah, stuff like that, you know, and a lot of events. I do bilingual emceeing for events and stuff. And
so did you ever work with anime where you actually use Japanese for any anime work as well?
So one of my favorite things that I did, I have done, in fact, the one Team T-Nets, the one that's going around the film festival, is actually voice work done in Japanese. But probably one of my favorite projects was Batsumaru, Bad Batsumaru.
I love that, the Sanrio.
Sanrio, and I'm a huge Hello Kitty fan.
Me too.
Yeah, and I'll do the voice real quick. It's really, it's gonna wake you up. I'm just warning you. It's like that. It's like really, you know, you feel like you're, it was kind of a nightmare one way, like, because it's a really hard, it's a stressor on my throat, but yeah, I was so committed, because I was like, anything for Hello Kitty, anything. Yeah.
That seems like really fun work.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun, yeah.
So, as far as going forward, like, have I heard that you might be actually kind of going back to Japan, or
I'm going to help with the Olympics and do some stuff with the Olympics, which is coming at 2020. I was originally thinking about going over for a year or 2 years, but right now I'm thinking probably more like a 3-month stint or something. But yeah, I'll definitely be helping out with that, because to me, like, Tokyo is my hometown, and so it's my hometown Olympics, so I want to do stuff. Not volunteer, though. I refuse. I'm like, no, being in the entertainment industry, I've done enough volunteer work in my life. No. Yeah, but.
Well, that's good. So do something for yourself, especially
just be a part of it, you know?
Exactly.
I think that it's kind of a really important time for Japan. Like, they've gone through a lot. They're still going through a lot. Like, they've been in a recession for 20-some years, you know. It's just crazy. Even though, you know, it's not a super recession like some of the other countries that have had to deal with, you know, like, especially in South America, you know, Brazil, and, like, you know, places like that. Greece, or, you know, it's not like that. Like, they're still a world power, but they've definitely gone through a lot of challenges. And then with what's gone on with the earthquake, tsunami, and just so many, natural disasters have happened. And so I think that, I really want to be there, with them and enjoy, I need to be a part of that experience. Yeah.
Right, part of that culture. And so do you actually do a lot of support work then, as far as like helping out with some of those things in Japan? Like
I've done tons. You mean like charity work and stuff like that?
Yes, like some charity work, or like if you've been back and forth like between the U.S. and Japan and have gone there since the earthquake and everything.
Yes.
Have you had other projects and things that you had participated in?
By projects, do you mean just projects in general, or?
I guess some of those charitable type projects.
So, in fact, with the earthquake and tsunami, I was actually working with a friend. We were going to be working together anyway on some kind of charity event, and I was supposed to be emceeing for it, and I was also going to help find talent from the U.S. It was, going to happen at an area called the American Club in Tokyo, which is in downtown Tokyo. And then the earthquake and tsunami happened, and so I talked to Barbara, who was my partner, like co-producer, and I said, you know what? You and I will team together, and we'll make this great charity benefit, and we will bring in some people who, are currently working to help out with all the disaster, it was a disaster, like the housing, just everything, it was just such, and it's still, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, honestly, but, so we wanted to bring some people in and have them tell their story, and I actually reached out to, I don't know if you know this band, but they're Arrested Development, not the TV show. There's a band called Arrested Development, and I'm good friends with the leader of Arrested Development. So I reached out to him and I said, hey, because they love Japan, right? And I said, hey, Speech, and he's super popular in Japan as a solo artist. So I said, Speech, we'd like to have you come out. We'll pay all your expenses and everything, but we'd like you to do a show for free, and he agreed. And so we put together this really cool benefit charity concert, and and it was, and since then I've done other stuff as well, but I always like to, I think it's really important. I think that, especially when you're working freelance and you're in an industry like, the entertainment industry where you're constantly having to hustle for your next gig, sometimes you can kind of lose perspective, and you can kind of not realize how fortunate you are. And one of the things I always try to be very conscious of is I'm so lucky, so I always try to give back. Yeah. Except for the Olympics. I'm not giving back. Well, I am, but I'm not, I have to get paid for that. Yeah.
So Lisle, as far as if someone might be interested in actually starting a career with kind of something similar along the lines of what you have, whether it's like through radio or voice acting, or do you actually have a group that you work with, or like have any other recommendation or suggestions for anyone starting out?
I think probably, we get asked this question a lot when we go to anime conventions. People say, how do we get into voice acting? Or how do we get to be, or even on radio, whatever. And one of the things that I always tell them is, you need to really believe in your own journey. There are many times when, I would never, ever have imagined I would be where I am now. But I think one thing I can say is that I knew that I had a special journey that was all mine. And so, and I believed in it, and, I just let things happen. Of course you get frustrated, you get impatient. Sometimes you're like, what? I didn't get that audition again, and stuff like that. That always happens, and sometimes you get disappointed too. But I think at the end of the day, the big picture, it's all about understanding that you have your own personal journey. So don't try to compare to other people, figure out your own thing. And don't try to say, don't try to people say, oh, I want to do exactly what you're doing. It's like, no, figure out your own thing. Do your own thing. You've got your own individual,
do whatever niche that they have, or just work with their talents, or what they're actually good at. So
exactly.
even if one person's not good at something, then another person might be better at something else, which
absolutely,
work with what you know.
And figure out what you are good at. I think that that's part of the journey as well, that I have done many things. And I'm like, I might be pretty good at that, but I don't think I really enjoy that. Or, sometimes I'll like something and then I won't be good at it, So it's just about figuring out your own thing. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. And I like how everybody does come together here at these cons and actually shares their insights, and it seems like everybody's really friendly and positive and being able to just kind of work with everyone. And so from these Comic-Cons or Fandom Cons or any other cons, have you actually gotten additional work out of attending any of these?
I have in that interpreting work for a lot of people. So a lot of times Japanese, I'll interpret for someone, maybe they're doing a new project and they need someone who can do English and Japanese voice acting, so they'll contact me, or maybe they're working on a project and they need help with the whole with language, and so so I have gotten some work.
That's really cool. So so as far as any future work, are you mainly just working with a lot of translation work at this point?
Well, I have that Team T-Nets, which is right now, going around the film circuit or the film festival circuit. There are a few things that, I hope to be happening, but I can't really talk about it, and I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to jinx it. But yes, exactly. Fingers crossed.
I wish you luck on some of your additional work that you have coming up. And so,
are we recording? Is everything okay? Okay, good. Huh? Oh yeah.
So I'm sure that our listeners would be curious as far as what animes that you actually would be interested in, whether it's I'm
really old school with my animes, so I don't even know if these came to the States, but I grew up watching Candy, which is an anime that hasn't been around for a long time, but I think, in fact, the woman who wrote the manga, got into a big legal battle with his studio, and so because of that, unfortunately, there's been no reruns and everything, but I grew up watching that, and that was my life, so that would say Candy, but then also Attack Number 1, which is a volleyball anime. In fact, I went into volleyball for 12 years because I loved that anime so much. Wow. So I was extremely influenced by that. And then also some of the slice of life ones like Sazae-san and Attack Number 1, which was not Attack Number 1, Ace o Nerae, which is I don't know I know that came to the States, but I think the English titles maybe Aim for an Ace or something. It was like a not high school, it was a tennis anime.
I noticed there are a lot of mangas or animes
that are
surrounded to sports, whether it's basketball, tennis, volleyball.
Yes, those are my life. I was really into sports too as a kid. So
I'm just kind of curious though, since you actually grew up there, how was the school system and everything for you?
I went to international school, so that's different. So I didn't go through the Japanese school system. I think it's a whole different animal now because a lot of the Japanese schools are much more accepting of international kids, but back then when I was going to school, it wasn't like that. So so I went to international school. It was all English schooling, English curriculum.
Was it from kindergarten through?
Kindergarten through 12th grade.
That's pretty cool. So I know that as far as Swiss school wise, did you have to do the typical clean up the classroom?
No, it really was an American style. Yeah, school experience. Yeah, I see that in the anime all the time. Yeah, no, that is very Japanese and still happens, but no, we didn't have to do that, yeah.
So is there anything else that you might be interested in letting our listeners know as far as any future work, any other things that you might actually want to see in the next couple days here at the Fandom Con?
No, just tell them to come on over to my booth. I'm right over there. And I'll be there with some figures, Nina Williams figures that I brought. Hopefully, maybe I'll come back again. Would love to. No, you can find me on social media. I'll continue with my journey. Who knows where it'll take me. So, I'm all about experiencing things I've never experienced before. And we'll see. We'll see what the future holds. Who knows?
Well, it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anna.
And I think we'll just kind of wrap this up here today.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. And thank you for listening. Our one captive listener.